Hey guys, my guest tonight, astrologer Jeff Harman, is going to talk about the technique he uses for his astrology, and he's also going to tell us about some predictions he has for 2023. See you in about 5 minutes. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust, turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing? I hope you said great. I'm doing great. Wow, the week's almost over. Tomorrow night we'll mark our usual thing with Nancy Matz, and that's great because it's Friday and it's always something to look forward to. I got a spot on my t-shirt. Look at that. You never know. It's paint. I craft a lot. Anyway, I want to thank you guys all for coming tonight. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. We are 45 strong up and down the state. And what that means is that if you think you might have something paranormal going on, we can get to you. It might take us a while because it's a big state, but we can get to you. And if we can't, I have mediums on the team who can do remote work. So it's a win-win, right? Anyway, I want to welcome you all to the show tonight. This is going to be for this season. Right now, this is our 125th show for this year already. And, because we looped our year into September was when we started. So, yeah, we're on 125 shows right now at this point for season 3. So it's pretty cool, pretty cool. Anyway, if you're watching from Facebook and if you like what you see, please hit that like button. And if you haven't done so yet, follow us because we're looking for followers, right? And you can find us on all the California Haunts pages on Facebook. You can find it under my name on Facebook as well. Plus, we're on Twitter, so we're Cal Haunts on Twitter, and I try to remember all these things. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, I am Ghosty Gal on Instagram. It's all lowercase. Also, you can find me and find this on TikTok, and that is California Haunts. So that's all lowercase as well. And we're also on Twitch, so we're everywhere. We're everywhere. I probably forgot somebody. That's just how it is. Anyway, I want to thank you guys. Oh yes, YouTube. Okay, thank you for reminding me. My producer reminded me it's YouTube too. See, it's just a lot going on today. And if you're watching from YouTube tonight, or you happen to find our YouTube is youtube.com/@CaliforniaHauntsRadio. All right, and if you happen to be watching from YouTube tonight, there's a little ghost. Let me get the little button. There we go. Point my finger. There's a little ghost down there in the bottom right-hand corner, and you'll see him with a magnifying glass and a Sherlock Holmes hat on. Click on him, and a red subscribe button will come up. We have nearly 550 shows over there. And there's also some videos from investigations sitting over there. And if you're interested in that sort of thing, because I'm a journalist, I like to vary my topics. So it's not always about ghosts and stuff. There's other stuff in there as well. Just like tonight, we're going to be talking astrology and what's happening for 2023. I like to vary stuff. So I think there's something in there that everybody would like. If it's not one video, it might be 2 videos, 3 videos. My guest tonight, Jeff Harman. It's interesting. When I did, I've over the years, I've had a lot of guests. I've had a lot of guests on my show. And you guys got to remember, for years and years, I was on Blog Talk Radio. I hosted a show on Blog Talk Radio before we changed to this format 3 years ago. And I was doing my research on Jeff Harman, and sure enough, he pops up. Jeff Harman was on my show 7 years ago when I was on Blog Talk. So that's kind of cool, right? That's really cool. And I didn't even realize it until I did the research, to check his background and stuff. But he was on my show when I was doing the show on Blog Talk. So it's kind of cool to have him on. I'm really excited about it. So tonight he has a unique type of astrology that he utilizes. So we're gonna maybe ask him about that. And plus, you know what? We're in February right now, so we're only in a month and a half of this year. So it would be interesting if we could ask him about 2023 and see what he what he forecasts coming up for 2023, because I know a lot of people are interested in that, especially after what we all went through, for the last couple of years, right? Right? Okay, well, anyway, without further ado, I'm going to bring him in. So here we go.
All right.
Hello, sir.
Hello there again. How are you?
Good. Good to have you back. 7 years. Oh, my. See?
A long time.
That's a long time.
They call it the 7-year itch, right? You get an itch after 7 years.
That's really cool. I did some Googling, and there it was. It's California Haunts Radio Blog Talk, and I went.
Yeah, I remember that. That was a long time ago. That was 7 years ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
So how are you, sir?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you. I'm
fantastic. For people that don't know you, tell us about you.
Well, I got started in this game a long time ago. I think it was back in the 60s. I was sleeping in my bed, and I had I actually had 3 little pet rabbits. No, they were pet guinea pigs and rabbits. That's right. I had guinea pigs and rabbits. And I dreamt that my little guinea pig had died and it was laying on its side, you know? So all of a sudden, I jumped out of bed. I ran down 2 flights of stairs because we were on the 3rd floor up there. And I go out in the backyard, and there's the guinea pig laying exactly like it was. You know, I was just a little kid. And my mother said, I told her about the dream. She goes, "You astral traveled." I said, "Wow, that's really cool. What's that, Mom?" You know, so my mom was really an amazing lady. She was into astrology. That's how I got into astrology, was from my mother. And, you know, I was actually born at a very early age too, she told me, but that's a joke. But in all seriousness, she was very good at introducing me to the paranormal world because she was always interested in things. You know, she was into medicine. She started out as an LPN, then became an RN, and you know, I think ended up almost at a nurse practitioner. She was a specialist in hemodialysis. And then when the 70s came around, you know, I started driving cars, and you know, I was like Dukes of Hazzard where I grew up. It was northern Wisconsin, and you know, I think I drove semis before I drove cars. And you know, I would go out with the girlfriends, and she would peg them to the T, and I'd go, "Well, you know, this is a little more than mother's intuition." I said, "What are you doing here?" And she goes, "Well, I got their charts, you know." I said, "Come on, that stuff doesn't work. You know, astrology." I said, "Come on, does it really work?" And she's like, "Well, you better check it out before you knock it." And I did. And that's when I went, okay, you know, this, you know, you got my attention here, because I started getting really into technical stuff, you know, and I always loved music and science and electronics. I used to have a recording studio and did forensics work, all kinds of stuff. And the more I started looking at astrology, I go, whoa, wait a minute, this really is a science. It's a science of the soul, and it's a science of very, you know, you could say extra, you know, paranormal forces that are always going on this planet. And then as time bore on, you know, we got past PC, which was before computers. And then by the late 70s, we thought we were pretty cool with the Commodore 64. Remember those? And then we got the 128. Your iPhone has, and your Droid has about 100 times more power than any of those things had.
I had the Tandy computer. Okay, that doesn't tell you something.
All right.
Right,
good for you.
What was it? 8 megabytes.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. It was like nothing, you know? Yeah. So we were casting charts by hand. And then I got into this, you know, not to get into my whole life story, but I got into a lot of really fun stuff in the 80s and the 90s. I just really had a blessing of getting exposed to many different types of astrology: the Vedic astrology, the Nadi astrology, location astrology, in particular things like interrogation astrology. Many people may have heard of horary astrology. I hate that word. It's a Latinized term that really just means asking questions. It's really useful in hauntings and paranormal stuff. I get hired sometimes to do a lot of different really interesting clearings and some pretty nasty stuff, I might add. I've actually gotten sick from it, and I'm very careful when I go into it. And I use interrogation astrology to assess it. In other words, you can just cast a chart and say, is this person, house, place, whatever you're looking at, possessed? You know, and you can see it very, very clearly. And then another type of astrology is called electional astrology. Now, I just put up a YouTube video just before I came on the show here tonight, and it's about that the planets, can the planets actually have good and evil? If you go to my YouTube channel, Jeff Harman, Astrologer Astrology, you'll see it. It's the latest one up. And we talk a lot about the soul, and there's a lot of videos on there about the disincarnate souls. We call them ghosts, right? Or errant souls. The Hebrews called them mazals, which is an errant, evil, mad soul. You know, those are the bad ghosts.
Right.
So anyways, fun stuff. That's how I got into it.
Fantastic. And what is your favorite type of astrology to do?
I like them all. I really have to say, I've probably been down enough cul-de-sacs in astrology. You know, it's going on almost 47 years now that I really can say I've been, you know, studying it. And before that, it was a curiosity. But I would say I really love the Vedic astrology and the Nadi for the soul, for looking at the path of the soul and reincarnational things. And I really enjoy the Egyptian Chaldean, which kind of matriculated up into the medieval. We call it classical or traditional astrology
Mhm.
for other types of things like elections and interrogations. And I also love location astrology. It's absolutely amazing. I do that in readings every day for people. And, the world is so crazy right now. I
Right.
mean, ever since the pandemic, whatever you want to call it, COVID,
Right.
that came in the last couple of years. I mean, life has been insane, and people have really had their lives turned upside down. And even more than COVID, we see what's happening right now in the world. They're bringing the climate change ruse upon us. They're bringing the, whole movement here for transhumanism, and we've entered a new era as of the winter solstice of 2020. I actually was on Coast to Coast years ago. George was asking me, Jeff, what do you think of the Mayan calendar? And I said, not a single thing. I said, I can't come up with anything for the Mayan calendar. So what I'm worried about and most concerned is 2020 forward. And the reason why we had a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, you literally could have set your watch to it when COVID broke out. My jaw dropped. I knew something was really big going to happen, and it did, right exactly on the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And for anybody listening, the Saturn-Pluto opposition brought us 9/11. Remember that one when the buildings came down like sparklers and Building
Right.
7
Right.
came down? And then from jet fuel. And then the next one, of course, then we had the Iraq wars and the Mideast and all the Patriot Acts and all the other things that they stuck in there,
Mhm.
which was the real goal. And then we had the Saturn-Pluto square, which crashed the banks when they federalized all the major banking institutions. And then COVID. And those are the big marker points that have at least been recent in the last 25 years. So I knew that was coming. And then the one I'm speaking about on the winter solstice is a different type of astrology that goes all the way back to the cataclysms such as the flood of Noah. There's something called the Great Conjunctions, and this is very ancient astrology. And the Great Conjunctions was always known as the time that Saturn and Jupiter joined in the very first degree of a fire trine, which is Aries, particularly. They call it the first bounds of Aries in the Egyptian zodiac. And it's amazing because the world changes of that. Well, that's exactly what happened right when George Washington and the Revolutionary Army was forming. And of course, the founding fathers of this country were creating the United States of America. And that great conjunction was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And I think it's safe to say we have seen one heck of a bunch of change in the last 240 years since then. We've gone from horses and buggies to steam engines, trains, and high-tech computers. Now they want to put them in your head. And on the winter solstice, we had the next one. See, it's not exact, but approximately every 240 to 250 years, we get what they call a mutation conjunction. It's kind of a weird word, but those are the subconjunctions. And that's what happened. We are now in a high-tech, accelerated era, like I think is going to blow our minds. It's not the Aquarian age. A lot of astrologers feel we're in the Aquarian age, and I'm not here to tell anybody what we are or aren't, but I don't believe that. I don't. Does it feel like the Aquarian age to you? Tune in Klaus Schwab sometime. Tell me if it feels like the Aquarian age. or the WEF forum. Just go sit in on that one for a few minutes. Tell me if you think you're in the Aquarian. But anyways, the bottom line is it's a high-tech era. It was in the first tropical degrees of Aquarius. And I think that's why a lot of people feel it's the Aquarian age.
Mhm.
And we're going to see the world become like Minority Report. It's already moving in that direction.
Mhm.
And we see the fascism moving in. We see the encroachment of the whole world that we used to know fading away. They're trying to shut down petrochemicals. The whole, petrochemical industry is under attack.
Right.
And, if they were providing dilithium crystals like the Starship Enterprise had, or
Right.
hydrogen like I know they have, the government's been running around on cracked hydrogen for a long, long time.
Mhm.
They're running a lot of drones on that, I've heard. And so we have alternatives, but they're not bringing them out. So what are they doing? They're trying to literally bring in fascism. It's a high-tech fascism. They want chips in your forehead, digital currencies in your pocket, and they want you to own nothing and be happy about it. And it's kind of scary.
It is
That
kind of scary.
That's a haunting right there.
It is a haunting, yeah. It is scary to
We
see
have the
what's going on.
communists haunting our world. They're
It's
worse
like
than the
every time
demons.
I go shopping with cash, they make faces, anymore because they just don't want to take cash anymore.
That's right. That's right. And why would they be doing this, without providing, a little like a quantitative easing into a new world would be nice, but they're not wanting to do that. They're jacking the prices up everywhere. I was just talking to several people in trucking company industries, insurance industries, and they're all saying, we don't know if the private carriers are going to be in business much more. And if you turn off diesel fuel in the United States of America or Europe, we won't eat. Unless you've got a garden in your backyard,
Right.
you won't eat because everything gets, including the fuel, gets to every outlet in society by trucks. And of course, trains are critical too. It's one of the most economical ways. And they all run on diesel fuel. And even though Elon Musk has got the electric, semis out there, let's face it, that's a minority compared to what's out there. And so
Absolutely.
they're jacking up the price of everything. And then you got the Fed turning off the faucet so that you can't get money easy.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's some weird things going on right now. What do you see happening? I mean, we're already into February. So what do you foresee happening? I mean, we
Well,
just talked about that, obviously, but what else do you see happening?
well, the United States has a birth chart just like we do. And most astrologers kind of agree that the true beginning of the United States was the Declaration of Independence. That's really when they stuck a stake in the ground and said, that's it. We're declaring independence. We're going to war and we're going to become a sovereign nation. And, other people have used other charts, but I find that one's pretty doggone accurate. And that birth chart, I can tell you, is mirroring what I'm seeing right now. The United States is going through what we call a Pluto return. And a lot of people might listen to this and say, yeah, but Pluto's not a planet anymore. And I would beg to say that my observation of Pluto, even though I'm primarily a Vedic astrologer, is it's very, very powerful. There's three things that come in small packages. One is C4, the other one's dynamite, and Anthony Fauci. If you use any one of them, you're going to be in big trouble. So I always say Pluto has a lot of power. It really does. And my observations in location astrology is extremely powerful. And here's a good example. The Roman Empire, which was, for most historians, somewhere around 30 BC started, it divided. It actually kind of split up and divided at the first Pluto return, which was right between 240 and 250 years. It completely dissolved on the second one. So the United States, and this isn't the Roman times anymore. Now we're really, we're in a very accelerated high-tech world. And the United States has that going on. Plus, it also has a number of other very powerful progressions. And people might say, well, what's that? Because that's what I said when I first heard it. Progressions are whenever a birth chart happens, either in a human being or a city or a place, each rotation of the earth is called primary motion. It's just a fancy term for the rotation of the earth. And if you're a flat earther, it's still the celestial cycle of the diurnal, nocturnal cycles. So the bottom line is each day equals a year. Well, how old is the United States? It's 246 years old and some change, right? As of last July 4th.
Right.
So the primary directions that are going on right now on the United States this year, between now and the end of November. If I could share the screen, I would show you, but it's stunning. In fact, you can go on my YouTube video. I show that on there,
Okay.
Jeff Harman, Astrologer, and you can see the graphics. But I can tell you, we're going to see quite potentially a lot of violence and unrest. I would not be surprised if we see some serious terror attacks. I know a lot of things are coming across the border, and that aren't just who they tell us. And some very dangerous times in the United States. One other thing I would mention is we have an aspect called a Neptune square Mars transit that's actually completing this right at the end of this month, beginning of next. So it's right around the 17th of March. And people might say, well, what does that mean? Well, to give you an idea, right before the Civil War in 1861, we had that same series of aspects. This one's more powerful. And I'm not saying we're going to get a civil war or anything like that one, but civil unrest and trickery is very likely to be. And this is why we're seeing the dystopia of these governors, the district attorneys, and the crime and the increase in the infrastructure and the just literal cancerous destruction of our major cities. And it's way worse than people think. I mean, just turn on the news and, I'm hearing just violent crime everywhere. And it's really sad. And this is a very coercive, destructive force. And this is exactly what was in play, even though it was on a smaller scale right before the Civil War. If you look at the political unrest that was going on, it was really quite formidable in the history books. And we've got that going on right now. And the Civil War broke out just, I think it was about 3 or 4 months after that astrological aspect in the 1860s. So I expect this summer, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope I come back on your show sometime and you say, Jeff, you were wrong, because I want to be wrong about this. I do not want to see violence. I do not want to see unrest and riots, but it's really, the astrology shows that is a high probability.
Wow. Let
Let's
me
hope
ask
that's
you, how can the stars and the planets control stuff that goes on here? That goes on the Earth. I mean, I know the moon and the sun, control the tides and all that goes on, but can you kind of explain how that all works?
Well, yeah, and that's I get asked that question a lot. In fact, that's one of the videos we just put up. It's really believed in the ancient Egyptians, the rabbis too, and I also might mention the Vedic or Vedantic stuff, which is very, very ancient, all said the planets are literally hierarchical portals of angelic forces. Scientists laugh at this stuff. They go, well, wait a minute, the gravity of Saturn is less than the man in the delivery room delivering the baby, right? How could it have any effect on us? Well, they're looking on the wrong channel. It's not gravity. It's not all the magnetics everyone thinks and all that stuff. It's really very deep, and I don't think we can measure it. It's angelic forces. That's what I said back in the 70s. I said, come on, how can this stuff work? And then I started looking into it. And I mean, in my life, I have seen repeatedly progressions and transits. It's so accurate, it's creepy. In Vedic astrology, there's a lunar mansion that surrounds the earth. And the theory, the word etheric energy, this is the same thing that ghosts, when we exit these meat suits called bodies, how can even the consciousness stay maintained, right? Because, science will tell you, well, your gray matter, your brain just decayed, right? It's rotting in the grave with worms in it. How could you have any thoughts anymore? Right. Well, consciousness and planets and stars and angels and spirits and demonic forces don't need bodies. And this is what's interesting. Even though it's quite fascinating, planets have bodies. They got quite big ones too. They're gigantic, spheres rolling around the solar system, and the flat earthers dispute that. They think they're reflections, right. Which, I'll give them their due. Hey, I'm open-minded, but my opinion is that the galaxies are real, and even though we may be in some kind of a fish tank here, that's a possibility. I really believe they're not making up all these myriads of galaxies. One of the best texts about this is the Puranas in India. The Bhagavad Gita has something to say about it. The Upanishads are very well known. I think a text that I really mention a lot in one of my videos on my YouTube channel it's called the Sharar Hagilgam. And Sharar in Hebrew means gate, and Hagilgam means cycling of the souls. And it's a profound text. And it mirrors a lot of the ancient Chaldean and Egyptian practices too. And that is, they knew that literally thoughts are elemental forces. We emit them out of the third eye chakra. And life creates an elemental force. In the auric field layers, we have this thing, but then we have what they call etheric double, which is the next layer out. And they say there's 4 layers that go out. It's really deep stuff. And these texts speak to that. In fact, many of the Nadi and Vedic texts say that we keep reincarnating here until they call them samskaras. In the West, we call them elementals. And there are attachments to the aura that seem to be interblended with the lower 4th hierarchy of fallen spirits here. We're actually intertwined with that, they say. And the planets seem to be multidimensional portal switches that are operating not on frequencies, even though there are frequencies to the planets. A lot of people have gongs and bowls, and I agree with that. They are, those lower frequencies do resonate with the planets. They may be harmonics, but the stuff that's going on souls seems to be really, really high divine stuff, far beyond, I think, any scientific instrument is going to fully understand or be measurable. A friend of mine who just passed away, people may have heard of him. His name was Dr. Claude Swanson. I really like Claude. He wrote a book. He was on Coast to Coast. He was on a lot of radio shows. It was called The Synchronized Universe. And he was really one of the first hard scientists to come out of DARPA and the government and break off and say, well, let's really take a good close look at all this paranormal stuff and see, these people nuts, are we nuts? Of course we're nuts. We like being nuts. But he actually took a really hard look at it. And I used to have Claude over my house in Tucson, and I really enjoyed him. And I have some videos of him on my YouTube channel. And what's so great about that is he was proposing, like some of the quantum physicists did, the models that at least are open, let's put it that way, because quantum entanglement and all this stuff is great, but that still doesn't really get us into any hard sciences that are other than theoretical. And Claude was in that same realm, and this gets into AI too, because, I'll tell you, this new era, the astrology brought us into, I can tell you, we are going to have AI serpentining around our brains. It's going to be literally like Minority Report and Blade Runner here. The military has stuff that would creep us out. They are building stuff that is stunning. The artificial intelligence they have and the unmanned things and the robotics they have, way past anything we're seeing on the internet, way past, and kind of scary, like Terminator type stuff I hear. And what's eerie about that is they will outsmart any one of us in terms of lower level logic. I had a gentleman back in the 80s. I really liked him. His name was Don Myers, and he was a research scientist for the government in World War II. And I met him in the 1980s. He was getting on in age, and just a genius. I've never met anybody who knew as much about electronics as he did. He'd sit there smoking his Lucky Strike cigarettes, and he'd go, well, and he'd go off, man. He was a genius. And he told me that he was on a research team, and they, in the 50s, were researching how efficient can a human being be. So the military was thinking about this a long time ago. And you know what they found out? He said somewhere between max 50, maybe 60% tops. He said, because we got to go to the bathroom. You get hungry, you get tired, you got to sleep, right? Oh, I don't feel like doing that. You get emotional. So we are really spiritual beings. And when you come to the military and business and productivity, they don't care. They want obedient workers. They want
Mhm.
fast, obedient workers. Don't go to the bathroom until I say. So this is all about this right here and productivity, right? George Carlin was right. War is when old men in business suits send young men to war, now young women, for their business interests. And they want efficiency. So the robotics field and all the stuff Tesla proposed 100 years ago, they love, especially right now, because you don't get answers back from AI and robots. You just keep sticking new batteries in, right? So where they're at right now is eerie. And where I'm going with this is they're talking now, like Elon Musk is saying AI is going to take over the world. He's right. Look
Mhm.
at Klaus Schwab. I don't know if a lot of people may not know who he is. You may not want to know who he is, but he's like Dr. Evil. I just heard him on the internet the other night going, whatever rules AI will be the master of the world. I went, what am I listening to here? Is this a James Bond movie, or is this really got this guy for real? Look at George Soros. He looks like the Sith in Star Wars. He
Yeah.
actually looks worse than the Sith or the Emperor. So, these guys are creepy, and these aren't the guys I believe at the top of the totem pole. These are the guys we're seeing.
Mhm.
The real owners, and George Carlin was absolutely right. I love George. He was one of my favorites. And I got to tell you, he was so right on when he said, forget the politicians, you have owners. And we do. The people in Washington, if they're not bought and paid for, they're coerced. Or
Mhm.
if they're not that, they're just powerless. So the owners who print the money at the top of the pyramid, they run this place. And those are the folks that I think are behind the Soroses and the Klaus Schwabs. And they really want transhumanism. They want to integrate this stuff. You will lose everything, be happy, and we'll program you. So this is a really clash right now that I see between the demonic forces and globalism and nationalism. This is what the astrology says. And where I was going a minute ago is AI is actually far more efficient at tasks, memorization, and all this stuff than any human being can be. But
Mhm.
there's one thing that it doesn't have, and that's a soul
Right.
and consciousness. And it'll never do what you do, because we pick up a cup of coffee or a glass of water because we're thirsty. We
Mhm.
cry. I love that movie Terminator 2 with Schwarzenegger, where remember Arnold Schwarzenegger had to be lowered into the vat of you know bubbling molten steel because he had to
Mhm.
be destroyed, because he said, I can't cry like you do. And that's the difference. Humanity is divine. And I always show this graph on my YouTube videos. The one I just put up tonight is a really cool one. And it shows the four worlds of creation. And the soul is created hundreds of dimensions above astrology, and a lot of religions, particularly the rabbis, have said, hey, Israel's above astrology, right? And why do all the religions hate astrology, or they despise it at least? And that's because they're right in one sense, and that we are above astrology. The astrology is the lower karmic machine that seems to impinge upon our incarnate worlds. And the upper soul and what they call the Rosh, which is the spirit, and the Neshma, which is the lower soul, and there's actually two layers above that, are really what is the upper portions that are bleeding down into here. And the
Mhm.
lower conscious mind is not us. What we're talking with and listening with, it's not truly us. It's the elemental that we create. It's called the lower conscious mind of the nefesh in the Hebrew, and it forms in the womb, and it actually can dissolve. That's why some ghosts hang around a long time. Is
Right.
the lower conscious mind is very fixed, and it's very interesting stuff. So and that relates to AI, because AI will outsmart our lower conscious minds.
Mhm.
It's already doing
Mhm.
it.
Well, when you talk about AI, first thing that comes to mind is Sophia the robot. Sophia the robot's creepy, if you've ever seen her. The other thing that I've noticed with AI
Yeah.
too is like for shows like this, if for advertising and stuff, where if you're not good at doing your own pitch for a show, there's AI software out there. There's companies that have this software out there that will do it all in AI for you. It's all done for you.
Group chat.
Group
It's going
chats.
to get eerie. I mean, people are doing their homework with it right now. They have in China. You've probably seen those newscasters in China.
Mm-hmm.
It's eerie.
Yeah.
They're all AI. It's
Yeah.
a total robot.
It's crazy, and they're getting so good at it. Even Disney. I mean, I was just at Disneyland a couple weeks ago, and the animatronics in their newest stuff is so far better, and they move like they're actual people now. They're not the herky jerky. I mean, the technology is just moving on so fast.
You bet it is, and it will. Well, what do you think? What do you think? In other words, a bottomless pit of funding would be like in the secret black ops in the military. What do you think they got? They've been doing this. When we hear about it, they've probably been doing it for 25 years.
Well, that's what my dad.
When we hear the names dropped out in society and on the news, they've been doing it for 25, 30 years.
Well, that's what my dad used to say about air shows. Like when they started to bring out the SR-71 Blackbird, and my dad would look at me and he'd go, I bet they're going to ground this thing now because it's been around for so long. Otherwise, they wouldn't be taking it public.
That's right.
Yeah.
He was probably right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we have, like this war in Ukraine, which I do not think is going to get better. I really don't. I hope I'm wrong about that. But I was asked on another show, and I cast an interrogation. Will the Ukraine war finally, be ending anytime soon? It doesn't look like it. There's a lot of money being made there. There is a lot of mysterious stuff going on there. Some of the most powerful people in the world came out of that area over there. And, we can't mention labs or anything like that. And it's atrocious. I wish war would never happen. I mean, when you see, I remember back in the 70s, I saw someone accidentally get shot. It was horrible. I mean, people don't realize how gory it is to see a human body shot with a gun or with weaponry. It's not pretty. It's stunning how much blood we have in us. And it's not a pretty sight. And when you see war, I mean, those bombs, they're not smart. They call them smart bombs. They're not. They will blow up anything in their vicinity. And the problem right now with the brazenness of what's going on with this administration is, everyone's worried about nuclear weapons, and that's a thing to worry about for sure. But I can tell you the weaponry the Black Ops got, the United States is sitting here with particle beams, directed energy weapons, and lasers on satellites, on ships, on battleships, on a lot of these planes. They don't need to come back and get more ammunition. They just keep firing. And they have some really advanced weaponry. And this stuff doesn't drift with wind. It doesn't, have to be calculated for distance. It's zap, and you got it. It's like Star Wars. And Petraeus let it out of the hat not too long ago on the news. They said, well, what if, Putin, let's go and nuke. He said, we'll take out his whole fleet. And you know what? He's probably right. They can. So they've got weaponry right now. Like if China moved on Taiwan, I really think the secret military could kick the crap out of China and Russia at the same time and do it probably pretty fast. And the only reason they wouldn't do it fast because it's too profitable not to. They make a fortune off of these weapons. I think Rothschild said it best, where Rockefeller says, I make more in one day of war than I do in a year of peace. And they do. It's the business of war. It's really sad.
Isn't it a case, though, like in that kind of situation, too, that, I mean, if we're going to hit them, they're going to hit us back?
Yeah, I'm sure they will, but we already did hit them. Look at the Nord Stream pipeline.
Right.
You don't need a brick to fall on your head to know who did that. I mean, Biden stood right in front of us and said, if they go into Ukraine, we're going to take the Nord Stream pipeline and we'll be stopped. Well, it sure got stopped, didn't it?
Absolutely. Now, going along this line for AI, what about alien encounters? Do you believe any of that? That's all going to come out too? That there's aliens actually here on Earth and whatnot?
Well, I think they've been working with extraterrestrials. There's a lot. I think that's where a lot of these directed energy weapons and particle beams and stuff may have come from. They're clearly. I think they've been doing reverse engineering stuff for a long, long time. I mean, you know, Lieutenant Corso and Camille used to write for UFO magazine, and I got exposed to that whole world out here years ago. I actually was. I had the director of the Tucson UFO kind of commission me to do a study on a lot of UFO events, and we looked at a lot of the more famous ones, like Maelstrom Air Force Base, the stuff going up at Skinwalker, Maelstrom, left at Eastgate in Europe, and many other, Travis Walton, on, and Whitley Strieber. We looked at all these different charts, and I have also worked on remote viewing groups where some of them have been involved with the military, some of them have not, and very interesting stuff. And I actually did some booklets on them that were very detailed. And the question on all of it was there any correlations between abductions or attacks or events and also remote viewing that we could tie into the celestial matrix of astrology? Because, a lot of people today, they call it astrology.
Mhm.
Prior to the 1800s, it was astronomy, and it still is. When you really get into the true astrology, it's astronomy. That's what it is. It's astronomy of the soul. And we found a lot of correlations. I found a lot of times abductions, and not to discredit anyone who has had one, but some of them are a demonic attack. That's my opinion. And it showed up in the charts. And when I say showed up, I mean when the birth chart was analyzed, and then we looked at transits and progressions that were happening during the times of those events, clearly it was there. I've had my own stuff. In the 70s, I had a motorcycle. About 3:30 in the morning, I'm coming home. And way up in the woods, near the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, is a little town called Sainer in St. Germain. People may have heard of it, Eagle River and all that. So, and I was going along about 40 miles south of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So I'm going along, and I caught a yellow flashing light out of my mirror, and I look up, and sure enough, there's this weird football-shaped, kind of triangulated weird light up there, and I didn't think anything of it, and I kind of felt a little eerie. So I hit it a little bit, and there's a lot of lakes up there. And then I ended up on our lake, and I'm coming down because the lakes are always lower. So I'm coming down this hill to the Lake Drive, right? And sure enough, a couple of seconds later, boom, the bike dies, right? And I went, okay. And then, of course, 70s, I smoked back then, right? Took the big lighter out, I lit it up, and I'm looking around, no blowing fuses, And then I thought, well, okay, I'm still a few miles from home. I don't want to ditch it in the woods. So I knew a guy that lived up the road. So I pushed the bike down there and outside of his road, and he came out and was going to give me a ride home. And he noticed that same craft up there, and then it caught my eye, and I said, yeah, I saw that over on the other lake, on Big St. Germain Lake. And he goes, yeah. He goes, it's pretty weird. He says, we see these around a lot. And so he gave me a ride home. Next morning, took the pickup truck, and my mom gave me her and I rode over together, and I was going to put it in the back of the truck, but just in case, I brought her along in case I could get her running, right, in the light. Well, to my amazement, I figured, well, I'm just going to try this thing, right? And I remember the night before, we even took a wrench and arced the battery terminals. Dead, because we wanted to see if the battery was dead, So, and it was flat dead, not even a spark. So the next morning, I hit the ignition, boom, starts right up. Ran like a top. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, no blown fuses. And this kind of stuff has happened to me a lot, where I've seen weird craft and phenomena, missing time. A lot of people know about that. And there's clearly a lot going on. And I think our government is way in bed. This could be a lot more like Men in Black than we know. It really could, from what I've heard. I've talked to guys in the Marines. There's, I shouldn't say this, but they're doing a study right now of these craft off of Zuma Beach. And for anybody listening, Zuma Beach is right off Malibu. It's where Baywatch, a lot of those scenes, a lot of commercials done out there. Gilligan's Island, though, one of the scenes was filmed out there one time. And it's also where Major Nelson met I Dream of Jeannie. They did a scene. So it's a very famous place where a lot of filming is done. But off probably about, I think it's about maybe 800 yards out in the ocean, there's this huge shelf. You can actually see it. I think on Google Earth, if you zoom in, there's this like big show, and they say craft are coming in and out of there like crazy. And these guys got some pretty good measuring equipment. They said it's almost instantaneous sometimes. It's like they're almost disappearing in portals, the speeds they're hitting. And I heard, God, it was back in the 80s. I was teaching a class at a college, and physics class, and one of the students piped up. He said, my dad's an emerald. And he says, they take submarines underneath the California coast almost all the way to Salt Lake City. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, I'm not supposed to tell you that, but he said he told me that. And I said, okay. So it makes you wonder, what's really going on here? And then we hear Area 51, and I have talked to so many people in the ufology field. Jim Delatoso is a good friend of mine. And I stayed with Jim when the Phoenix Lights were going on in Village Labs over there, Dr. Lynn Katai. And in fact, I met Lynn Katai, and she came in with all the tapes, and Jim was at Village Labs and Dr. Swimmer. We were all looking at the tapes. And I got to tell you what, anybody who, has an IQ above room temperature can figure out real quick, there was something going on there. And that was gigantor, that craft. And I have seen stuff driving across the 10 and the 8, the 10 freeway, the interstate, and the 8, which goes down through Gila Bend into Tucson. That'll blow your hair back. I saw these torches that were like 10 stories tall up in the sky. It's the weirdest stuff I've ever seen. And, of course, I'm all by myself, trying to get the phone, fumbling,
Right.
driving, and it's pretty wild stuff. I'll tell you that. There's a lot going on here. I've seen so many crafts in my lifetime. I used to travel across the United States on motorcycles, and I would all the time, I'd look up and something would zip away in multicolors, so.
Do you foresee any disclosure happening where, we're actually going to find out, like I said, like someone in your neighborhood might be an extraterrestrial, or a hybrid, and you don't know it yet?
Yeah, it's like They Live. Remember that movie?
I remember that movie. Yeah.
Yeah, with the glasses, you look and all the signs said something different. I think they're keeping it quiet for a while. I hope they're not. I know there's a lot of stuff coming out on the news stations, and it's almost like they want us to know, like these aerial balloons and aerial UAPs and all our UPAs. I think they call them aerial phenomena, unidentified. Yeah, aerial phenomena, UAPs. Yeah, I like the UFO and old school, but yeah, they could, only to their advantage. I don't think they're going to tell us that much. I met what was his name, Dr. Stephen Greer, nice guy, and Dr. Who is it, Lear? I don't know if anybody knows him.
Yeah.
Dr. Yeah, of course he passed away, but we used to talk to him, and I mean, he was a really, really nice guy. And I would see him over at the MUFON in Hollywood over there.
Isn't he the one that used to remove the implants?
That's right. He would take the implants out of people's teeth, out of their feet, all over the place. And, he would analyze them, take them to labs. There's no question. This is some really pretty bizarre stuff. I had one guy once in Colorado Springs, which that's where the Tesla lab is. Don't worry, there's nothing there. They took it all. But it's cool to see, but the real stuff is gone. But there was a doctor, his name was Dr. Hal Huggins, and he had shown me where they were hitting him with directed energy weapons. He had rashes all over his feet. And I remember I got jolted sitting by him in the room talking to him. He removed all the amalgams from people's teeth, which he claimed was a huge health crisis. And I think he was right about that. But, I'm not a doctor. I can't give medical advice. But my opinion was I got all mine out, and I'll tell you what, I started feeling better, and I had chronic fatigue so bad. And it helped me a lot.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of stuff that's going on. We hear these stories of Skinwalker Ranch and these portals, and we hear, stories of, giants and Tartaria and all this stuff. There's a lot going on this planet that nobody's telling anybody about it at all. And I'm absolutely convinced a lot of it's true, because I've seen with my own eyes. My grandmother, who was born in 1907, said in the teens and the 20s, she saw all kinds of stuff on the farm. She said a big white ball of fire, which really wasn't fire, but it looked like fire, rolled through the front door of the house and rolled out the back door one day when the two doors were open. And she said she saw all kinds of stuff. So it's really cool.
Well, that's funny. We just did a case. Well, no, we didn't just do a case, but during COVID, we did a case out in, I think, Roseville or Rockland, where the family reported a ball of fire went right through their house. And I mean, I live in an area where we don't get, lightning fire and all this. So, I mean, who knows what the hell that was? But they swear up and down. The whole family swore they saw this go right through the center of their house.
And they probably did.
Yeah.
And they probably did.
Yeah.
I mean, I have, had people, I think it was back in the late 70s, about 79, when I was in a car. And I was with a friend, and he's the one who recognized. He said, Jeff, he said, how the hell did we get on the other side of this interstate? It's late at night. And I looked at him and said, that's a really good question, because I don't know. And he said, it almost seems like it's 20 minutes to a half an hour later. He's looking at his watch. Back then we wore watches. Now you have your phone, right? But, I mean, and we were both completely sober, so right. This is stuff that, I don't know if you ever heard of Dr. John Mack.
No, I haven't.
Dr. John Mack is a real famous psychiatrist. He's I got to meet him with Camille out in Malibu. And a lot of people listening might have heard of him. Dr. John Mack was actually commissioned by the Rothschilds, or was it either the Rothschilds or Rockefellers, to do a study on UFO and extraterrestrial phenomena from a psychiatric standpoint. Really smart guy. And he mysteriously got killed in London just about 3 years after we knew him, a few years right after we met him. And we were actually sitting out at Frank Lloyd Wright's designed house out there in Malibu. I forget what, way up in the hills, gorgeous. And what an interesting guy. I mean, his opinion is not only is UFO, or was, not only were the abductions true, but he is kind of like how I feel too, and that is, and many others who research this, that some of it is extraterrestrials and some of it's demonic. And some of it's demonic. The demonics are very real. The smartest thing the spirits ever did was convince us they didn't exist.
Right.
And the religions have really, I think, in some ways, even though, we get a guy with a suit tie and a microphone telling about the devil, it's just a little deeper than that one. And when you look at some of the ancient Hebrew documents in Chaldean and the Vedantic, and particularly when you get into some of the secret societies, they are exceedingly well aware of them. And, we hear about a lot of the child trafficking, the cannibalism, the sacrifices. This is nothing new. This has been going on for thousands of years. And there's something about blood, of course, David Icke and all that. I met David Icke once. Right. And David's a cool guy. He gets ridiculed by some people, but I like David. He's actually a very smart individual, and he's an observationalist. He's actually discovering a lot of things that are actually quite accurate. And, this is a hard thing to report on. I love coming in from the more astrological and spiritual paranormal angle, and that is that many of these ancient texts prove it. The video I just put out is, can astrology be both good and evil? And the answer is unequivocally yes. See, you can, in a birth chart, especially in Nadi astrology, if you're born with an exalted planet, that means, meaning a planet that's really strong is what that means. That means you've got good karma in that specific area. If you're born with planets that are very challenged and is very complex, I always say, forget Trinity, Neo, and Morpheus. This is truly the Matrix here. And Nadi astrology blows my hair back. I see people, they exit the body right when certain configurations happen. I just had a friend, Michelle White Dove. She just passed away. I don't know if you know who she is. She's a psychic and pretty well known. She's really wonderful. She was a very good psychic. And a lot of people liked her. And I got to meet her a while back. We were going to do some show work together. And she just passed away. And I looked at the chart. See, the moon's eclipse points, which are known as the north and south nodes in the Western astrology, but in Vedic astrology, they call them Rahu and Ketu, the head and the tail of the dragon. You and I and everyone else listening will exit this body when we get in certain configurations by progressions and transits to those. They seem to have a very mysterious regulation on the longevity of life, which is different for everyone. You see children who don't live a day, and you look at these charts and you go, my God, I mean, it's in the chart. So we're looking at a matrix here, and full circle to what you asked about before. How do these planets work? The ancients said they grasp the aura, but that's not gravity. That's not some torsional wave. It's stuff way beyond anything we can readily measure. And it's certainly there. There's angels that rule every single degree of the zodiac. And I always rectify a chart in sidereal Vedic astrology by looking at spirit is believed to become manifest right on the eastern horizon. See, we're all born at some place on this earth, right? And when we draw first breath, they actually say the angel ties the spirit, psyche, and soul permanently to the body for the duration of the life at first breath. Breath is spirit. It's called Rosh. And that place that you're tied in, that hospital, that, wherever your mom had you, whether it's on the floor in the kitchen or at the hospital or in an airplane speeding along, that spirit is tied right at that point. And that is where spirit becomes manifest. And that degree, if you shoot like a laser off the earth into deep space, you would find those fixed stars, or what they call angelic degrees. And every time I see them, they're so accurate, they're creepy. It's stunning. So, and it's one of like 10 angels that are believed to guide the soul. And it's not us. Their influences, they say, that the soul created. See, that's why I love Nadi astrology. And Nadi astrology says, you're not your astrology. Your astrology may be you. My camera time's up. So
where'd he go? Yeah, we can still hear you.
Where'd he go? They abducted him. No blue beam, though. See, if you see a blue beam, then get worried. But
what I think about, I always think, like the Mario games. When he drops off the screen.
Yeah,
that's where you go. You're on that pile of Marios.
Yeah.
So what's next for you?
What's next for me? I don't know. I just keep going.
Good answer. I like that answer. It's honest. How can people find you,
sir? I just take it as it comes.
How can people contact you and find you, sir?
Oh, the best way is Jeff at jeffharman.com. It's HARMAN. And then, the email's the best way. Okay. And then also my YouTube channel, check it out. And, some good stuff coming out of that.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Well, thanks for having me. I haven't seen you in 7 years. It's good. Yeah.
Let's not make.
We didn't talk much about hauntings, but that's okay. It's
maybe next time. We'd like to have you back. Only not 7 years, but sooner than 7 years, obviously.
Yeah. Well, you know my number. So all right.
Absolutely. All right, Jeff. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your evening. Thank
you so much. You too. Okay. You bet. Bye now.
Okay. Bye bye. Okay, that was fun. I learned a lot. Okay, and that was a great discussion. Tomorrow, it's Friday, Casual Friday. I haven't heard from Nancy for a couple of days because she's been sick. So hopefully all goes well tomorrow for Nancy, and we can get her back on tomorrow. So that'll be our Casual Friday. We've talked about spiritual attachments before, but what we never really got into talk about was how some attachments will make you feel, because like I talked to people in previous shows where we've had the discussion about them draining your energy. When you have a entity go through you and things like that. That's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. Is what can happen if something is attached to you. So that ought to be an interesting topic tomorrow. Thank you guys for coming tonight. I really appreciate it, and I have to get Jeff back on sometime. That's pretty fun. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. Again, we're equal opportunity here at California Haunts Radio. And let me cue all this stuff up. There we go. Cue up my buttons. I don't have any information to show you on him. My hard drive has filled up, so I have to clear my hard drive of some stuff, and I can't even operate Photoshop on here to put together the slideshows or anything for the end. So you're just gonna have, if you want to contact him, either Google his name or go back and just play the end of the show off. It's the best I can do. I got in here late because I had a late doctor's appointment, so I didn't get a chance to clear my hard drive to do any graphics work. So I'll be doing that tonight. But anyway, I want to thank you all. And again, if you're watching from Facebook and if you haven't done so already, please hit that follow button. Also, hit the like button. If you like the show, hit that like button. If you're watching from YouTube, once again, over here in the bottom right-hand corner is that ghost with the magnifying glass and the Sherlock Holmes hat on. Please be sure to click on him. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the YouTube page. Or if you're watching from YouTube, please hit that like button. I'd appreciate it. I'm also on Instagram under Ghosty Gal, lowercase. We are over at TikTok under California Haunts, and that's all lowercase as well. We're Cal Haunts on Twitter. Anyway, I want to thank all you guys for coming, and I really appreciate it. And I will see you tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Have a great rest of your evening.